an interactive adventure where every one of your choices is ridiculous, zany, or crude. A set of outcomes all inspired by classic moments in science fiction. A twist that forces you to reassess every chapter of the book. This is Trial of the Clone by Zach Weinersmith, the mind behind Saturday morning breakfast cereal. I got this book for Christmas a few years ago. At the time, I was reading a lot of Zach's webcomics. They're a fun combination of philosophy, sci-fi, and comic nerddom that I like to catch up to from time to time. When I opened this book a couple weeks ago to reread it, I was surprised to discover it's signed. Little fact I learned from this book. The phrase "choose your own adventure" is trademarked and owned by Choose Co. LLC, and they are very litigious. So, this book, and most books like it, instead of being Choose Your Own Adventures, are just the generic brand Interactive Adventures. In this case, though, it's not just an interactive adventure. It's a parody of interactive adventure. The back of the book reads, "Make the right decisions and you'll prove yourself a hero. So here's a pro tip for you, try to make the right decisions." It seems like a silly piece of advice, but once I read this book from front to back, it took on a different meaning. Trial of the Clone is an interactive adventure, which means there are a lot of branches with different stories. However, there are 5 main parts to the story. So regardless of the choices you make, the broad strokes of your journey will eventually visit these 5 sections, and you can always guarantee that by the end, you will have one of the main endings. The book tells the story of a perfectly ordinary clone. Your first choice in the game is your occupation. I decided to become a medic. As with any interactive adventure, once I made my choice, I then had to flip a few pages into the future to see my next section. This is where the author does something clever. You see, they have added an illustration to the book every 2 or 3 pages. A giant spider, a space worm, a secret agent. Which means, once you make your first choice, you gotta go pass all of those. And the book becomes its own teaser, luring you into reading the rest of the book. Well, 3 choices later, I had become a terrible surgeon, I had fought an old woman, I had become the chosen one, and I had faked my way through a surgery with the president. Bear in mind, I was trying to make the right decisions all throughout this book. Based on the other branches I read, this was one of the tamer branches. Once you're done reading, you're off to part 2. War. Somewhere in space. The choices only get weirder from here. A lot weirder. If you choose to read this book, my recommendation is don't take yourself too seriously. The book doesn't mind leaning on sci-fi tropes and exaggerating them to comedic effect. So there's no problem with letting your character completely botch an off-brand Yoda training sequence just for the hilarity. The best joke comes in at the start of Act 4. You're teleported to a secret base, and the book informs you that if you philosophically believe that a duplicate of yourself, no matter how accurate, does not count as you, you die here. So it could be the end of your book, and there's no way to proceed. In my case, I gave myself some leeway. Which brought me to Act 5, which is where the whole book comes together. But we'll save that for the spoiler section. There's only 3 characters in this story that actually make it to the end. The rest are throwaways that only last a couple of choices. Fewer if you're careless with your weapons. The real character of this story is in its tone. It's a reckless, crude jokester of a book. One moment I was accidentally hijacking a starship, and the next I bit into an apple that was somehow filled with embarrassing photos of myself from the past. Speaking of the main character, the character you embody in this book, the clone, is not a talented individual. With another character in another interactive adventure, you'd be given 2 reasonable choices to a situation, and maybe 1 odd one. In this book, you're lucky if you even see 1 choice that seems rational. It's a comedy book. Don't expect deep character development. Just enjoy the ride. The book introduces several gameplay mechanics at the front. Inventory, combat, skills. There isn't much to keep track of, but you don't strictly have to stick to the rules in my experience. This book is very open-ended, and when I approached it, I didn't have a pencil, so I just decided to make a judgment call on each of the challenge moments of the book. When I ran into old grandma, I said, nope, I couldn't defeat her. And when I ran into the giant space worm, I went, yeah, I successfully eroded across the galaxy, no problem. From here on in this review, I have to talk about spoilers. If it was avoidable, I would. But the fact is, one moment near the end of the book completely flips this book on its head. Until Act 5, the book is a loose plot with a lot of weird and wacky adventures. Then comes the twist. The Vice President is the one to explain it. Turns out, all those weird, dumb choices in the book, all the incredible outcomes and the lucky results, they were all a part of a plan. Your character is special in this book because they make foolish decisions. Every smart decision you make blows up in your face. Every foolish decision is rewarded. On the back of the book was the clue. It didn't advise us to make the smart choice. It advised us to make the right choice. In this one very specific circumstance, making the most ridiculous choice in every situation was the right one. This was the twist that made this book memorable. Until then, it was a zany comedy. After then, all the comedy in the book had purpose. You weren't just doing dumb things. There was a reason for it. Of course, the second twist is, once you know your true nature, the book then asks you to start behaving like a mature adult. And after 200 pages of training and behaving like a child, it doesn't come naturally. The author of this book is very well read, both in philosophy and in science, and very well-read people can write some very silly stories. The illustrations in this book are fun, the situations are absurd, the gameplay mechanics don't get in the way of the reading, and the twist makes it all worth it. It's a short read. If you're a fan of the Saturday morning breakfast cereal cartoon, or you just want to lean into a ridiculous, zany sci-fi adventure, give this book a read. That is Trial of the Clone by Zach Weinersmith. Thank you for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed.